More witnesses are expected to testify before the Fees Commission when it resumes later this week. Statistician General Paddy Lehohla made his submission yesterday. He said the state must continue investing in education to tackle poverty, inequality and underdevelopment. We're now joined by political analyst Lukhona Mnguni, who's made a submission to the Commission offering solutions on free higher education. Lukhona, good morning, and thank you very much for your time this morning. Well, Paddy Lehohla was a star of the show yesterday in terms of the Fees Commission. It's interesting that issues like poverty are definitely linked with education, and we know that at the political economic level, poverty is one of the key challenges the country is facing. For you, what were the main takeaways that we should have from what Paddy Lehohla had to tell the country yesterday?
Well, morning, Dan. I think really the take-home is he represented information that has been quite out there to an extent, but he brought it all together in one presentation, because in 2013, the Council on Higher Education published a report on throughput rates and how dismal we were performing as a country, significantly telling us that of all the people that go into university, just about 50% of them get to complete their degrees, whether in record time or with additional years to the degree. And now that was a crisis in terms of throughput, and he puts it quite clearly yesterday when he says, you know, for every one black graduate that succeeds, there are 6 white graduates that are succeeding. Now, that is a throughput crisis, and that's why he's talking about the black people in South Africa might not enjoy their demographic dividend, which is to say, while there are more black people in terms of population size, they are not performing quite well in education to make sure that the group grows, not only its incomes, but its well-beings and all of these things. Of course, we have known for some time that there is underfunding, even for poor students in the system, and that came out quite clearly when he spoke about support for poor students being quite opaque in terms of how it is delivered. But another significant statistic that came out is that 80% of the households that send children to universities are actually earning below the 600,000 household income per annum. And that's very significant, because now that we are talking about the missing middle and the NSFAS students, what this says is we need to find a funding model that's going to accommodate this 80% of households, because we are clearly saying they cannot afford to take their children to university, and the state must come to the party to actually make sure that these kids stay in the university system. These students are there, they are succeeding, because he says we have done well for access. And you know, the big political statement has always been opening the doors of learning for all. So we've done well in terms of access, but in terms of throughput, in terms of retainment, we are not doing well. And that needs financial injection for us to improve our tutorship, for us to improve extended curriculum programs. A lot of bridging courses in a number of universities have sort of gone aside, because there's such pressure for universities to take people in the mainstream. But some people are coming underprepared. And of course, there is a bigger debate. Is it underprepared students or unprepared universities to actually accommodate these students? And we need to have that ongoing conversation from time to time.
Look, I would be interested to hear your view. The preparation of the youth in terms of education, does it begin in high school, or do we begin in the early childhood stage?
Well, there's no doubt, Dan, that you begin at early childhood development with making sure that your attainment of numeracy and literacy at that level is actually at adequate, because it's adequate, because that's when you are building the foundation. That's when the building blocks of education begin. But one thing that must not be lost in us as South Africans is that while we want a good early childhood development program, we must also not shy away to provide solutions to say, while the output at matric level, even those that get their bachelor's pass with good points then and are able to get into university, how do we give them support? Because the system currently says, as long as you've got 30 points, you go into a mainstream program. But we know that because of the disparities in our education system, which eloquently were put across by the Statistician General, some students coming from rural and township schools are not as well prepared as those coming from urban schools. But as an insider in higher education, I've also found that even students coming from urban schools, good schools, what we call good private schools, some tend to struggle with some of the content and courses that we lecture on in the university. So while the issue must go back to early childhood development and basic education, at higher education, we must not pretend there is nothing that we can do to try and
support at the tertiary education is very important as well. That's understood. Now, coming to really what's at stake now, fees, free education, free tertiary education. Paleli Hotla has used numbers, historical numbers, has used the legacy of Bantu education, has been painting a picture about what the challenges of underdevelopment, poverty, inequality at our education institutions, what that all means. But I mean, really, in the short to medium term, we still are facing this issue of funding, of providing solutions for free tertiary education. I mean, do you think this commission, Lukhona, is going to come up with those solutions? Because we are all waiting to find that solution.
Well, if we look at the preliminary report statement that the commission did for the president, I do think that we might have solutions coming. They might not be to society's expectation, especially those that are in the fees must fall movement, who are expecting quite a radical transition from the current funding framework to free higher education. Now, the commission is in set 5 of 8 sets, Dan, and what should be happening now in terms of their planning in set 5, they are looking for what do we mean by free higher education. Are we focusing just only on tuition? Are we talking about the total cost of education, which includes accommodation, books, and all these other things? And I think while the Statistician General's figures are important, he has come out previously saying that it's not possible to have free higher education for all. And I think now the commission needs to invite, especially people from the Fees Must Fall movement and the supporters there, to try and unpack for the nation, what do they mean by free higher education? How far and how quick can we attain it? You talk about a short to medium term. Are we looking for a reversal in terms of free hikes and then at some point gradually graduate into a situation where we have free higher education? This is what is at stake, and it's more at stake for this academic year because we already are hearing that NSFAS processes are not moving fast enough to meet the commencement of the academic year. So some students who have applied are still unsure whether they are going to get funding for 2017 or not. And if that backlog is not dealt with in terms of applications at NSFAS, we might actually see ourselves with a fees strike much quicker than we anticipated for 2017.
Thank you very much. Insights there from political analyst Lukhona Mnguni on the Fees Commission.